Okay, we're gonna get started today fairly quickly. Basically, what I want to do is I want to go over how to bring a 3D object into Photoshop to prepare it for texturing. Because even though a lot of people still understand that Photoshop is like an essential tool to have, whichever industry you're in, I believe everyone should learn Photoshop in one way or another. But basically, Photoshop has expanded its abilities for 3D, and it's even more of an essential tool, especially when you're doing visual effects or anything like that. So now you can bring a 3D object inside of Photoshop and manipulate it as if you are in a 3D environment because it has its own 3D environment with a new engine. And if you came from CS3 or 4, CS4, let's say, a lot of things are going to be different in CS6. So let's get started. So basically, in order for me to start, what I want to do is I want to not go, I don't want to import directly the object because I can do that, but I want to be able to control the canvas size. The canvas size really doesn't matter as far as the texturing and stuff goes. It's just our viewing for our viewing pleasure. So I can pretty much put, let's see, 1024. I can leave that at 1024 by 1024. Leave all these settings there. You can name it whatever. I'm not going to name it. Well, let's just say 3D. All right, hit OK. I'm going to hit Command H to hide the grid if you have it there. And a good way to start off is to go ahead and change your workspace to 3D. Mine is already there. Um, once you do that, you want to now import. I'm sorry. Let's see. You don't want to import. You want to go to 3D and new 3D layer from File. And I'm just going to use this test object that I have here. And it automatically imports. And if you don't see, let's say if I'm here and I have one of these other tools selected, and I'm trying to figure out how I interact with this 3D model. Basically, you have to go to your select tool here, and then at the top you'll see that, well, if it's not at the top, it'll be down here. Okay, so you want to look either here on your menu bar or you want to look over here at the top bar. Um, and you'll have this 3D mode kind of menu here. This will allow you to go ahead and rotate the object, pan the object and slide through the object, and also allows you to see what the camera is going to see. A lot of times when you're manipulating these things, you want to go ahead and use Shift V, and that will shift through all the different tools. I'm hitting Shift V here, and then I can go ahead and use that tool. So you want to experiment with that, and you kind of want to know the interface here. You want to be able to get yourself familiar with it because there's a lot of things you're going to have to change. Um, but right now we're pretty much just going over, um, you know, bringing this thing in. Now, once you have this in, we want to be able to check out the properties for this thing. So you have your basic layers menu. And if I click on this menu, what happens is this 3D menu comes up. If you don't have this 3D menu present here, let's say if I close that, if I don't have it present and I click on this, it automatically brings it up on its own. Now, I put mine up here before it was here with the properties, so you can go ahead and drag that tab and put it wherever you want. I like to see it just above the layers because when I'm clicking around, I want to be able to see that either I don't have my 3D object selected, or I have my 3D object selected, because once I select the layer, it automatically gives me the 3D options here. Now in this options, you have your environment selected here. You can select the environment, that's everything, and all the properties will come up in the properties panel. Again, if you don't see the properties panel, you can go into Windows and you can go ahead and select your properties panel here, and it'll pop up, and then you can mount it wherever you want. So basically, this will tell me all the properties, and I can change the ground and all this other stuff. The most important thing you're going to be looking at is right here is the mesh itself. This right here represents what I just dragged in here. And this model, I exported from Maya. I just created this real quick because so we can have something to work with, especially when we're going to be doing texturing. We're going to make this thing look like it has detail, and it doesn't. So I want to understand that this represents the model itself. I can double click on that and change the name. And also below that you'll see this default texture. This default texture is given to me by Photoshop because when I export it out of Maya, I don't normally like to export the textures with it if I'm doing texturing inside of Photoshop. So I just kind of leave it blank and let let Photoshop give me the texture, the default texture. Now if I click on the light, now you notice if I change this, now you'll see some difference in the lighting. So it does separate everything. You can do this just by scrolling, or you can do it by putting numbers directly into this area right here. They have preset lightings that you can mess with, or you can load or save your own lighting formation. And then as you click down, you have your default camera. Now what did that do? That means if I go ahead and click the camera here, and I start moving around, and I do my thing here, and then I want to go back to the default camera, well, I just go ahead and click the default camera button right there, and it'll bring me right back to the default camera. The second thing I want to be able to understand is how this is rendered. So if I were to have some textures or something on here that does not show up unless it's rendered, I can go ahead and go down to this button right here, and I'll click render. Now if you notice it's rendering, it's taking a little time here. It's doing all the specular fall off and all this other stuff. It's taking its time. And I'm just going to exit out of that, stop it from rendering. Because what we want to be able to do is we want to change that render setting so it doesn't take so long, so we can get our response a lot faster. Let's go to preferences in general. And then you want to go to 3D. And then from here you want to go to ray tracing, high quality threshold. You don't want that at 5. You want to put that at something like 2. You leave everything else the same. You can probably turn this down if the shadows is not. You don't need a high shadows. That's going to take more rendering time. So now if I go ahead and render that with the new settings, everything will happen a lot faster. Okay, so there you go. If I took this background right here and I hit Command Backspace, I can fill the entire backspace of the scene with that color. As a matter of fact, I can go ahead and add all the stuff that I normally add to regular 2D things on my back, on the back layer, or any other layer for that matter. So if I took this and let's say put another one there, and I put some noise here, and then I put some blur here. I'm just fooling around here. You guys do whatever you want. I'm just trying to prove a point here. That doesn't affect the 3D object itself. So if I click on this 3D object and I start moving around, as you can see, it doesn't affect that. But if I went here and I clicked on this texture, it'll open up the actual texture map. So let's say if I took this, I'm going to Command A and I'm going to copy, and then I went to this texture and I pasted it in there, hit save, and go back. As you can see now, my model has that texture there. Okay? The second thing you want to be aware of is that whatever I do here will affect the entire model, which means when I'm fooling around with this texture map, I don't like this background, so I'm going to change this background. So I hit Alt and backspace, or on the Mac it's Alt Delete. And I don't like this texture, so I'm going to double click this texture, go here, and I'm going to delete that. So as you can see, it updates immediately. I want to, let's say, be able to take my brush, and I'm just going crazy on this thing. I'm gonna hit D, which is gonna change this to black and white. I'm just gonna go nuts on this guy. And as you can see, I'm pretty much, going over this guy, and that's it. There is no layers here that I'm messing around with, and I can't just go Command J, create another layer, and start, sketching over it, because as you can see, this layer it's a 2D layer. This is a 3D layer. So what I need to be able to do is I want to know how I can create layers on the character itself. So what I need to do is I need to go ahead and click the texture, and when I click that, you see how Photoshop actually put this in UV space. Now that it's in UV space, I see I still have the same layer. I still have the same layer concept going on here. So if I click on this layer and then I go back here and I want a different color, let's say I click that and I'm going to put red, and I'm going to use the brackets to expand. I'm not using my Wacom right now. I'm just using the mouse to get my point across. So that's why I'm just doing these huge wipes over it. And so I just do that. Now, if you notice, when I go back to my texture, it only did the texture on that one layer. So we can use the same concept as we normally do in Photoshop on our 2D pictures. We can use them on our 3D pictures. So let's say I'm going to put 3 here. I'm going to now copy this. I'm going to paste it. Copy it, and I'm going to paste it. And then I'm going to hit Command L, and I'm going to change a little bit how this looks. Go back, and as you can see, the changes are there. So I think that's about enough for today. Well, next time what we're going to do is we're going to go over actually adding different maps to this and manipulating this even further. We're going to go further into the properties, and then we're going to go further into creating the bump map so we can have some details on this guy, and possibly changing the lighting or and stuff like that. One of the most important things we're going to have to go over is the understanding of the UV maps on this thing, because that's going to be the most important thing when you're exporting your object out of whatever package you're using. All right, so I hope you guys have fun. I hope you learned something, and I'll see you next time.